Greetings, Culture Warriors. It is Jeff Vieira, the author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. Back to the business world today for a good news story in a lot of ways, I think. One of the things that I've been pleasantly surprised to see coming out of the pandemic is more focus on culture. I'm seeing more articles on it. It's not just perceptive bias on my part, because certainly while I was working on the book last fall, I was seeking out a lot of stories on culture, and certainly my perception might have been slanted a bit because I was personally always picking up whenever I saw the word culture in any news story. But now I'm starting to see more and more featured on LinkedIn, featured in the news. I think this is a good thing and a positive development. This particular article from Entrepreneur Magazine, 3 reasons why a strong purpose is a good business idea. Most entrepreneurs, I'm going to trip over that word about 5 times, I swear to you, enter that space because they want to create a positive impact on the world. They have a purpose and a mission. They see a problem, they find a way to solve it. The reasons why we do these things that we do are everything. However, it can be all too easy to lose sight of this as we go further down the road. As investors' demand returns, or as revenue demands become more pressing, as we start to work longer hours and as our own ego starts to get in the way. However, purpose and profit are delicately intertwined. Perhaps you can have one without the other, but as we move forward into a more millennial and Generation Z-led workforce, those born between 1983 and 2003, and I must say as a Gen Xer, we get skipped over again. It's funny how there's never been any talk about a Gen X-led workforce. The case for having both becomes far more compelling and, yes, profitable. Number 1, it acts as a North Star. When you are clear on your own and your business's purpose and what you stand for and don't stand for, it's easier to make decisions and assess opportunities. This could range from the employees that you bring into your team to the partners you collaborate with to the clients you are trying to attract. As a startup or small business, you cannot afford to explore every opportunity that presents itself and constantly after the shining and new. Focusing your efforts on the right activities translates to streamlined costs and produces better results that are more aligned with the direction of the company. Obviously, you might not always get it right, but you will have to have a focus for your decision making. Then it's about trial and error to truly be innovative. Having that compass to guide you towards suitable opportunities you want to explore means that you have the liberty to experiment, and through doing so, find out what dead avenues to cut quickly and what core areas to focus on. Focusing on a few core areas impacts the bottom line. Could not agree with that more. I talk often about Southwest Airlines and their crystal clear vision to be the low-cost carrier on the routes that they service. It makes it very easy to evaluate opportunities. As their founder famously said, someone will come to me every couple of months looking to add chicken salad to the Dallas to Phoenix flight. And I'll simply ask them, will that make us the low-cost carrier on that route? And if the answer is no, they ain't getting no chicken salad. It's that simple. That simplicity, that focus is so important. It's not so much about what you say yes to, it's what you're going to say no to. Focus means just that. When you take a look at top sports teams, when they're in season, they have a laser-like focus on the next game. That's what makes them successful. They don't really look too far beyond the next game. They focus on what's right in front of them, and they make sure that they're as well prepared as they possibly can be for that challenge. And then once it's done, they don't waste a lot of time dwelling about it. They get on to the next thing. So I think that kind of laser-like focus really helps. It truly is the North Star in how you operate. You have to know your purpose. You have to know what you exist uniquely to do. 2, more motivated employees. What employee is really drawn in and emotionally engaged by spreadsheets, data, and KPIs? And what about money? Time and time over the last decade, we see research that suggests money is not the main motivator for many people. In a meta-analysis study by Tim Judge, the authors reviewed 120 years of research to synthesize the findings from 92 quantitative studies. The combined data set included over 15,000 individuals and 115 correlation coefficients. The results indicate that the association between salary and job satisfaction is very weak. The reported correlation, R equals 0.14. R is the correlation coefficient. When you square R, you get a percentage that indicates how well that particular factor represents the whole population. The reported correlation, R equals 0.14, indicates that there is less than 2% overlap between pay and job satisfaction levels. Furthermore, the correlation between pay and pay satisfaction was only marginally higher, R equals 0.22 or 4.8% overlap, indicating that people's satisfaction with their salary is mostly independent of their actual salary. Yeah, well, that may be true, but something that generating 115 of those correlation coefficients, they probably did a matrix of them across those 15,000 individuals, but I bet, given they're looking at 120 years of research, there weren't a ton of factors which overlap through all those studies. So, yeah, I hear what they're saying is that we don't have any proof that those things really correlate. But I'm not sure I would take it to the bank that the actual percentages are that low. Although some might love data and some might love money, what really engages and motivates people is a story, a mission, and a purpose. Purpose trumps motivation. I think that's absolutely true. Having a strong company purpose and clearly communicating that to your employees creates a shared philosophy and culture. Everyone has a part to play in that culture and makes an impact in their individual and unique way. We become an impactful part of something bigger than ourselves. Imperative, a U.S. consultancy firm, surveyed 2,000 LinkedIn employees and found that 41% could be characterized as purpose-oriented. Why should LinkedIn care? According to Imperative's research, purpose-oriented employees are 54% more likely to stay at a company for 5+ years and 30% more likely to be high performers. Low staff turnover and productive employees equals bottom line impact. Yeah, that is very, very true. I mean, think about it this way. We have an all-volunteer military in the United States, and they're very, very good at what they do. They are also paid very poorly, especially for the risk that they take. And yet, they continue to really show up in droves and get the job done. And they stay for a fairly long time. I mean, very few of them get out after the first enlistment or the initial commitment period. They try and turn at least once, and a lot of them are simply released because of the needs of the service, especially in an environment where we're drawing down from a prior conflict. So these folks make considerable sacrifices, up to and including their very lives, in order to do what they do for pay that's, often terrible. Why do they do it? It's because of the purpose. They are there fighting for freedom. They're fighting for their country. And that is a high calling. So that the power of that purpose, when you have it, it's more than just a paycheck. I absolutely agree with that. And God knows, you can go to some pretty lousy companies and get a good paycheck. They have to pay more because they're lousy companies and no one wants to work for them. So, having that purpose, though, really makes all the difference. I used to work for a company that did medical supplies distribution. And I used to say our teammates would run through a wall for a customer, even if there was a doorway right next to it. They were that dedicated because they believed that in fulfilling the orders as they did, they were saving lives. Period. That was a big advantage for that company in that industry. 3, customers love a purposeful company. Think of Airbnb, Nike, or Apple. What do all these companies share? Apart from being hugely successful, they all share a strong purpose. They all have a narrative that is used to great effect in their marketing and branding. They have all created an emotional connection with their audience. In these times of crisis, people instinctively want to be part of companies that promise to change things for the better and have a positive impact on them and the world around them. But the reality is that many companies are falling short. In the Deloitte Millennial Survey 2018, 40% of respondents believe that the goal of businesses should be to improve society. In the Deloitte Millennial Survey 2020, barely half of millennials felt the business was a force for good. That, of course, means that there is real opportunity for business to appeal to this younger, purpose-driven generation by actively showing their commitment to purpose. Doing so gives companies who do it well a competitive edge. Data actually shows that customers are more loyal to purpose-driven brands. An example of purpose's increasing importance is B Corporations, started 14 years ago in the United States. B Corps are companies committed to balancing profit with purpose and considering all stakeholders in the business, including employees and the environment. According to Reuters, there was a 25% increase in the number of businesses applying for B Corp status in 2019, although companies that classify as B Corps make up a very small portion of business overall. Do B Corps represent the wave of the future? As business owners and entrepreneurs, it's time that we stop seeing purpose as a soft concept with no impact on the bottom line and look at the pitfalls of not entrenching a strong purpose within our organizations. Having a purpose by itself is not enough. It needs to be entrenched into the culture and processes of the company. Absolutely right. Taking the effort to do this is a long-term play. However, to not do so would be to ignore the signs that this is the direction business is moving. I think they're absolutely right. We're working on something now that we call Quality 4.0. Industry 4.0 is the general term for how information and technology has brought about a new industrial revolution that we're just now kind of getting our arms around. And the Quality 4.0 initiative is the quality aspect of that. So think, business process improvement. And so when they talk about purpose and culture, well, that's a big part of what we see in Quality 4.0. It's an emphasis not just on the production processes, but on what Joe Duran, the famous quality guru, used to call Big Q. Quality across the entire enterprise. As I was reading the bit about businesses considering all shareholders and kind of thinking in terms of their overall impact on society, I was thinking to myself, my God, Junichi Taguchi, another quality guru, must be smiling somewhere up in heaven, because he was always teaching that the purpose of what we do in quality was not simply to meet specs. Specs are somewhat arbitrary. The purpose was to reduce the loss to society from our inefficiency and our defects in our processes. That's a little inside baseball for those of you who are not quality professionals, I know. But the general concept is this. The company should do what it uniquely does with as little a detrimental impact upon the world upon it as possible. Now, that could mean not polluting. That could mean not committing crimes. That could mean, in the case of Apple and Nike, how about not letting your company product be manufactured by Uyghurs in concentration camps in China? That would be a good start, wouldn't it? So when you think about those things, it's a higher standard. It makes a lot of sense, but you have to connect the dots on something else. What Taguchi was saying was that not only will minimizing that negative impact help your perception of your brand, but it will actually help your bottom line. The reason being is that he emphasized producing without variance. So if you produce the exact same thing the exact same way every single time, you're going to minimize negative consequences of having that variation. Perhaps when things go a little bit awry, we wind up burning through more of a toxic degreaser that we have to use. And that increases our costs in terms of safe disposal. It increases our risk of non-compliance, if you think about it in terms of the information and data world. If we can do what we do with less exposure of personally identifiable information of our customers to people with a no need to know, wouldn't that be better? Wouldn't that reduce the risk of, say, identity theft or other issues of non-compliance that would cost the company money and lead to bad things, fraud and theft, etc., in wider society? So I think they say it very simply here, but there's a lot of meat there in terms of what a purposeful company really is. But let's face it, you need to make sure that you're not underwear gnomes in setting that purpose. What is an underwear gnome? There was a famous episode of South Park where they parodied a certain type of business consultant mindset by featuring gnomes who stole underwear. And when the gnomes were put to the task as to why they were stealing underwear, they showed them their business plan. Step 1 was steal underwear. Step 2 was question mark. Step 3 was profit with big dollar signs. So the business plan was missing a little something. You have to have a way to translate the value that you're delivering into a tangible bottom line. Now, that bottom line doesn't always have to be profit. There are many nonprofit companies in the world which produce something else. I use a lot of military analogies. Obviously, the military in the United States is not for profit. And so what do they produce? They produce security. They produce freedom, etc. And so you need to be able to draw a line between what your company's purpose is and the benefits that it provides. If you get wrapped around the axle on, hey, we are going to be a zero pollution company, guess what? The best way to be a zero pollution company is to produce nothing at all. So be careful of following that thread too far down the abstract path and missing the concrete reality in the process. But that said, what a great article. As we note in the book, you start with the company's purpose, what it uniquely exists to do in this world. And then you translate that purpose into what would it look like if it perfectly did those things. So a company, a team that is perfectly doing that, what are the characteristics of it? You take those characteristics and you drill them down further until you get down into the tangible behaviors necessary to make those values perfectly realized. And that is your desired culture. That becomes the bellwether that you use to determine what your company or team or organization is, what it needs to be. And from there, you can start taking a look at what it actually is, what those actual behaviors are, and you can do a gap analysis and figure out, all right, how far are we? What areas are we furthest away from? And what can we do to get a little bit closer to the mark on that? People get wrapped around the axle a little bit when guys like Taguchi come and talk about zero variation because they say, well, that's impossible. You'll never have no variation. As you get better at measurement, you're going to find more and more variation. And it's like, yes, you understand that you probably asymptotically approach zero variation, by which we mean that if you picture this as a curve on a graph, that curve never really touches the edge of the graph, right? It approaches it but does not touch. So that's probably true when we talk about no variation. But the whole point is to stop looking for just tiny little improvements and say, hey, this year we're going to be 1% better than last year, and start asking the real question, why can't we be at zero? What would it take to get there? And you start to get a very different set of innovations when you look at problems kind of that way. Long story short, yes, I think that having a strong purpose is a very good business idea. It enables you to put in place the right culture for your company, to communicate it clearly, to have it understood by everyone who works for your company. And that gives you a real shot at living that culture and really delivering the value that your company exists to deliver. Thank you, and have a great day.